Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the Strategic Planning and External Relations Committee meeting of HART. We are in hybrid mode this morning, and the first thing we'd like to do is do the Pledge of Allegiance. If you can join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. And with that, we will go now to can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. This is Danielle from HART. Director Frazier?
Present.
Director Hudson indicated that he would be absent. Director Johnson? Committee Chair Kemp?
Here.
Director Overman?
Here.
Director McLean? And Director Schisler?
Here.
You do not have an in-person quorum, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear Director Johnson. Is he there?
He is not in the room, ma'am.
Okay, but is he virtual?
I believe that is the tablet that we have logged on for him in the room.
Oh, okay. Okay, great, thank you. I just wondered what attendance we had. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, and at this time, because of we're virtual, we don't have a in-quorum presence. And I'll just speak to this just for a minute, I'll say, because I know there's been some controversy about this, and I haven't been a big, in these committee meetings, I have been reluctant. I'm not reluctant about a board meeting where we have to move business along, but I have been reluctant about these, and I am, at this time, I haven't been 2 weeks out of my second shot, but it's not just about me, it's about the institution and the staff and everyone else, and I am very concerned that we've had so many COVID cases within the building at this time, and that our numbers, despite having gone down incredibly with the vaccine, are now rising again in Florida and in Hillsborough County to a level that concerns me to go kind of make sure that we're not necessarily endangering anyone or doing anything that could be harmful at this time, and protecting people's health is at heart as well. So anyway, I just felt a bit compelled to explain that at this time. We can't do approval of the minutes because we don't have an in-person quorum. So I think at this time, we have one public comment, I think, to be read into the record. Is that correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Okay, can we have that?
Absolutely.
Comment?
I received this public comment via email from Gary Cloyd. Quote, this is in regards to 5A TDP update for the second quarter. The transit development plan will only go as far as the agency allows. Where is the plan that is fair and equitable for the drivers, motormen, mechanics, maintenance, and PM crews that keeps this transit agency running? And he signed it Gary Cloyd with his phone number. And that ends public comment.
Okay. Great. Thank you for that. And with that, I think unless there's any other, unless council has anything else at this time, we will move to the presentations for the HART properties. Great.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Okay. My name is Ron Giroux. I am a project manager here at HART. I work in the PMO office. I'll be giving a presentation on HART-owned properties throughout Hillsborough County. This was a request given at the February 1st board meeting. So next slide, please. This is a map of Hillsborough County. And identified along the right-hand column is all the major properties that HART services. So this is a good reference point, and I'll let you refer back to this map if you have any questions about where any of these properties might be located within the county. Next slide, please. This is 21st Avenue main campus. We own this property. It's kind of our flagship property. This is where all the maintenance is conducted. This is where all our drivers are located. All of our fleet is parked here. A lot of administrative functions are here. Human resources, operations, legal, safety. You can see that. This is also where our main communication tower system is set up. Next slide, please. This is Ybor campus. This is a very interesting property. We own the building, but we have a lease with the city for the property that it sits on, and we maintain that property. This is also known as the streetcar barn. All streetcar operations are out of this property. This is where they're all stored. This is where they're maintained. It also serves as an administrative building, and you can see the list there of all the functions that are conducted through administrative side of the house. Next slide, please. This is our Marion Transit Center. Interestingly enough, again, this is another property where we own the building, but the city owns the property. And then the parking lot to the north, you'll see that the properties are outlined in a yellow outline, just to kind of give you a reference of the area that we're talking about that we maintain and we operate. The parking lot to the north is actually owned by FDOT, along with the property to the right of that and to the left of that. Those are all owned by FDOT. That is a spot for the future intermodal system for the high-speed rail if it ever comes into Tampa. That was their original intent on keeping those properties with FDOT. These are all the routes that service this area. It's considerable. And that's our daily ridership. The ridership numbers that are going to be located at each of these properties are pre-COVID numbers because we anticipate getting back to there. Next slide, please. This is University Area Transit Center. It's a full-service center. When there's a difference between a transit center and a transfer center, transit centers have customer service agents there that can purchase tickets, they can deal with customer problems, they can assist customers directly. A transfer center is just that. Customers get on and get off buses and transfer to different routes. So this is a full-service transit center, has bathrooms and all other amenities. This is located just north of the VA hospital, so if you're familiar with that area. Those are the routes that service it. And that's our daily ridership. Next slide, please. This is the Northwest Transfer Center. It's located off of Sheldon Road in West Waters in the western part of the county. Not high ridership there, but it is a very beautiful property. We just recently added an operator break room to this property. Next slide, please. This is the Temple Terrace City Center Park and Ride. HART has owned this since 1987. The only one route goes through there, and that was the daily ridership. And just note that this is a great possibility for future route expansions. Next slide, please. This is the Hidden River Park and Ride. Pretty decent ridership. It services, there's several businesses in this area. This is in the northern county near I-75 in Fletcher. And we lease all the excess parking spaces that we don't currently utilize to the businesses nearby. This is the South County Service Center. This is down in Ruskin, just south of the Amazon Fulfillment Center. Extremely low ridership here. And we lease this property to the Hillsborough County tax collector in this area, and they placed the building on it. Then I recently got some background information on it. The reason why we did this is because of the low ridership, and it actually took our buses off route to get into the parking lot and try and navigate the parking lot. So we made kind of a deal with the Hillsborough County tax collector. They put us 2 bus bays on that 30th Street so that our buses wouldn't have to go into the property, and that's where that is. But it's great possible future expansion if we ever expand into South County with more routes. Next slide, please. This is the Route 301 South Park and Ride. This is kind of the property that kicked it all off. We leased the northern portion of this park and ride to the Hillsborough County School District. We are not currently using this property, so it has no ridership to show you, but it certainly gives us much opportunity to expand routes in this area in the future. This is Casey Road. This is just a vacant piece of property. It used to be a park and ride. We haven't used this property since 1992. It has no ridership. It's about 5 acres, but a good portion of it is swamp, as you can see in the picture. But it does offer us potential for expansion in the future because it's in central Carrollwood area of the county, if you're familiar with that area. Next slide. So this is a list of other properties that we do not own, but we do operate out of there, showing the routes, the daily ridership on and off. And then there's how we operate through there, either through an agreement, a lease, or DRI, which stands for Development of Regional Impact, where a developer or a landowner, in order to develop their property, have to go and enter into an agreement to provide some form of public transportation support. Next slide. And pending any questions, that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Giroux. And I will, I'm looking here, Commissioner Overman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr. Giroux, for the presentation. I was, and when I looked at the map, I was trying to remember whether the S or the T was the property that we went into arrangement with the school board. So I thank you for clarifying that. Can you share with me, given the ridership for the South Shore Regional Service Center, it was so low, is that a function of the lack of frequency, or that just makes it almost impossible to actually use it for any reason? Or is that just because there's no one in that area that has access to transit to get to that center? Do you know?
I can just relate that the information that I do know. There is not a whole lot of development in that area. There's a shopping plaza that is directly south of that service center, but there's not a lot of community in that area, but it is developing. So I would say that, and I'm not sure of the frequency of that route. I would refer to Mr. Cochran and his team, but I would say that it offers us an opportunity to increase frequency once the housing developments in that area do increase, because if we all know, South County is booming right now. So we do anticipate 10 years from now that might be a major place where we will have to increase service. But currently, right now, there's just the shopping plaza that it services and the Hillsborough County Tax Collector's Office, obviously. So, but to speak to the reasons for frequency there, I would have to refer to Mr. Cochran and his team.
Right, but at that location, is it possible that so for example, if we had a circulator that served Apollo Beach, Ruskin, Sun City Center, and Waimama, would there be an opportunity for a transit connection at the South Shore Regional Service Center, and then possibly also a service center so that you don't have blank trips for, the north-south route? Because I know that's oftentimes a problem where you have just passengers going there but not coming back, and that may be because of frequency, but having a blank trip is never a fun thing. So I was just curious if the land itself would serve, would be able to be served by a transit or circulator service, because it made mention of buses going on and off the property. So I'm not able to see from the illustration what that looks like. And I'll stop there.
Good morning, Commissioner Overman. Those are good questions, and we've jotted those down, and what we can do is get back to you with a response at a later time. So thank you for that.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you very much.
And I'm thinking it says council member up here. I'm not seeing, council member Gil Schisler. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Great presentation, Mr. Giroux. One question. I believe I started this whole thing back in February as my original question. But Are any of these properties the intended use for the Northwest facility if we ever secure the funding to build that? Are any of these properties available for that? For the maintenance facility if we go that direction?
So we entered into a lease agreement with FDOT, and to answer your question directly, none of these properties are part of that. We did enter into a lease agreement with FDOT for a piece back in August of 2019, when we thought the tax referendum was going to come through and we would need a place to store buses temporarily. And we did secure through a lease 50th Street property right across from the Wawas, the old Oak Park Elementary School, and that was going to be utilized for a temporary storage and parking. But it's currently not used, it's just vacant land that we currently entered into. But we do have anticipation to possibly use that in the future.
So if the planets aligned and funding became available and we were to choose it, we do have a place we can go to and develop?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I don't see any other hands up here. And I'm thinking too, well, first of all, I thought it was really good to have this presentation, and I really appreciate it. Even when we had the issue come up about South Shore, I asked to see what that property was like and where it was. I had no idea that HART owned so many properties. And I know with more looking at the future, and I think Ms. LeGrand will be pretty essential in assessing this as we hopefully expand, that we start looking at other places that can act as centers for both our buses. And it might be different than what we have here now, but not having just a single facility. And I think that that's, from what I've heard, that is more true too as you move to electric, if I'm not mistaken about that. So just very interesting to know that we have all these properties. I had no idea, and it's good information. I appreciate the very thorough presentation.
You're welcome.
And I'm sorry.
I just said you're welcome.
One more question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so on our priority list, we have the purchase of a property, and actually the development of a property for the maintenance yard, for an expansion of the maintenance yard. But there was definitely on the priority list of purchasing a property for like $20 million. So is it my understanding that none of these properties could fill that bill? Is that the decision we've made?
So currently, none of these properties currently meet that requirement. Essentially, when we were looking to expand our maintenance, we were talking about our vans and paratransit fleet. We looked at a piece of property that the county currently owns in South County, and it's off of Hartford Street and 66th Street. And it is a pre-existing highway department building, so it has a lot of the infrastructure already in place. And we thought it was at the time, in previous executive administration, they thought it was a good move for us to start talking to the county and start looking into that, obviously pending the funding that we did not receive. Talking through with maintenance and with the staff, we still feel that that's a very strong, positive way to go. But currently, we're waiting to see what the future plan that Ms. LeGrand puts forward, and that might be part of it, and it might not. But I would leave that up to Ms. LeGrand and her decision as how we want to expand.
Okay, so the other option is a land swap with the school board. It's my understanding next to your maintenance yard is a piece of land that the school board owns. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then they are leasing from us down in the south part of the county at the, right? At the 301 location, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Has there been any discussion about possibly doing a land swap if the 301 location has room to handle what the school board needs?
We have not been in discussion with the school board since we sat to discuss this possible lease at 301, and that was prior to Ms. LeGrand coming on. So again, we're anticipating that that, as an organization, the vision going forward that's presented by Ms. LeGrand will include potential expansion and discussions with, other municipalities within the county. So I wouldn't want to speak ahead of what Ms. LeGrand has intended to put forward.
No, I understand. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you, and I don't see any further questions. And I understand at this time, we just have the information with the TDP by Mr. Cochran. And Mr. Cochran, were you going to speak to this a little bit, or what were we intending here?
Madam Chair, before we move forward, I did want to announce for the record that Director Johnson has joined us and is physically present. He did join us at approximately 9:08, but I wanted to make that clear for the record. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. And so then we'll move back to Mr. Cochran.
This information item was really at the discretion of the committee as to whether there were any questions related to it or not. I'd be happy to answer any questions. There was no formal presentation prepared for this.
Okay. Here's what I'm just wondering about. First of all, can you, because not everybody, can you talk about what the TDP, the Transit Development Plan is, and can you also talk about what that COA is, the Comprehensive Operations Analysis, to this group, and just give a little bit of, at least start to take steps into this, because I think it's more important that in the future too, that we start having presentations and looking at this in a, as a group and as a committee. But if you could just explain those two concepts to this committee, that would be good.
Sure. So I'll start with the TDP. This is a multi-year financial and operation plan that's required by DOT to be done every year. Every fifth year, we're required to do a major update that essentially sets a baseline. From that, the subsequent 4 years after that, we are required to do minor updates. And those minor updates report on our achievements or any changes to our goals within the TDP for as it relates back to that baseline. Within the TDP, essentially, you can kind of think of it as a subset of the overall strategic vision. So of the agency. So the strategic vision of the agency has a goal to get somewhere. The TDP is essentially an action plan as to how we get there. It outlines the funding needs, the requirements, and ensures that we are putting in the, we are identifying and putting the projects that we need to meet our goals through a 10-year horizon. So despite the fact we do a major update every 5 years, the TDP is a 10-year horizon. So within that, we have funded and unfunded services that we outline, and part of that are outlining the capital needs to be able to meet those operational services. We also outline major capital projects within it. And the critical nature of that is that any funding that becomes available from DOT for a project has to be identified in the TDP. So that's why it's such a critical aspect of the agency as we update these every year. Does that give you a good idea?
Yeah, and so does that that includes like a major portion of that would be preparing the TIP each year?
Yes, so every project that is in the TIP is in the TDP. So there's a section.
Right.
So there's a section in the TDP that talks about the TIP, identifies the project priorities that we submitted to the MPO.
Okay, and so any changes that are made to the transit development plan, when and where and what's the process for how they're made?
So any changes can come about through identification of new projects, as, say even a new project idea becomes available, we would put those into the new update in the following year, so that they are identified in the latest TDP. So now the TIP is a little different because you can do TIP amendments throughout the year, but the TDP you update once a year. So any changes that we do, we can update those in the TDP on an annual basis, as opposed to the TIP where you can do amendments throughout the year.
I see. So I think it would be good as we move along and there's projects, even if you're updating it once a year, that they, the projects come to this committee and are started, start to move forward, even if it's only approved once a year, so that we can start to not just have a huge, batch thrown at us once a year and without, our kind of vetting them in a way that makes sense. How about the comprehensive operations analysis? Can you talk about that for a few minutes?
Sure. So the comprehensive operation analysis that was procured previously for us was really that was essentially the strategic plan at the time for us to identify the services and operations that we would be able to implement with the All for Transportation surtax. So
But it's not just that. These are, how often do organizations have comprehensive operations analysis? They do it, even if there was no surtax, we would be doing that, correct?
Sure, it's a necessary thing for every agency to do. Our last one was Mission Max in 2016 that we did. So really, anytime there is a major shift in how we want to put service out, it would make sense for us to do a comprehensive operations analysis. And even if we, at some point, we feel there's a time for us to get out there, because part of a critical part of a COA is that market analysis and understanding, the needs of the people, how it's changed, how patterns have changed, and we've been able to benefit from the tasks that have been completed to date from the existing COA. And as part of that also is the origin destination surveys. We put that on hold this summer due to COVID, and we're talking to other agencies throughout Florida and the country to see who's done origin destination surveys in the COVID environment and how they are doing it, and to see, because at some point we need to get this origin destination survey going. The last one we had was 2014, so it's been a while.
So are we under a COA now?
Well, we have
one ongoing?
We have the first 4 tasks of the COA. I know it's been, at this point, it's been about a year and a half since the board has had approved that, and we have gotten all the way through the market analysis, the identification of optimizing some routes, and the final step to that was to do the origin destination survey, which is still incomplete, and then the the creation of an operational plan that would be funded by the All for Transportation surtax. So it was in total $410,000. $300,000 of it was funded by FTA, and the final $110,000 was to be funded by the All for Transportation surtax, but since we have not received that, we no longer have the funding to complete that final piece, but that's almost null and void anyway, since the point of that last task was to create the operations plan for the All for Transportation vision, so.
Except, sorry, I'm just not quite understanding. Don't you do these anyway, even if there wasn't a surtax?
Yes, and there is an optional task in the contract at this point in time for us to work with Kinetics, who is the company, who's the vendor that we have contracted for the COA, that we are looking to identify on a task order basis to be able to do some, to be able to do some work with us on how we can improve and optimize the system.
Is it possible to bring some of these COA findings and updates to this committee?
Absolutely. We can bring you a full update as to where we are at this point at the next meeting, if you'd like.
Yeah, I think that would be good because, rather than wait until I don't know what, and then hear everything just thrown at once, I'd really like to understand what progress is being made, and I think it would be good, to engage this committee and the board in that vision and progress. So I'll just I'll leave it there. I don't know, Commissioner Overman, your hand is raised.
Actually, yes, it is, and I do have several questions, but I'd like to, Ms. LeGrand raised her hand, so she may be.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see her hand raised.
Well, it was, she actually.
Okay, Ms. LeGrand.
Thank you,
Sorry about that.
Commissioner
I would have
Overman.
called on you if I seen your hand up there.
I had the real hand and not the virtual hand, so my apologies for not using the right tools. I just wanted to state, and Chris is doing a good job just trying to walk through the process, but typically when a COA is engaged, it's really focused on a vision of the organization. So if you think of it in levels, first you have a strategic plan which articulates your vision and things that you're trying to accomplish, and then the COA takes that vision and moves forward in understanding what the market demand is for where the organization wants to go. Based on what Chris is saying, when the COA was initiated, the vision was that you were going to have the surtax dollars and you're going to move the organization forward. And the real purpose or the impetus behind that COA at the time was how do you realize the vision of having this additional funding and being able to penetrate the county at a different level than we currently were. That being said, that's not where we are currently. So the approach that we're looking at is really establishing, and you've heard me say this before, establishing a vision for the organization based on the funding that we currently have. And in order to do that, we have to take a couple of steps, I would say, not backwards, but to pause a little bit to really have conversations through this mechanism of this committee meeting. And you and I have talked about this. Moving forward, what we'd like to do at this meeting is really use the hour to start having conversations about the vision of the organization. Where do we want to go? Where do we see the demand? We can use some of the information from the market analysis from the existing COA to help us to map out, where we see these concentrations of demand, but then really establish a vision for the organization and then finalize the COA as it relates to really how do we implement said vision. And then the TDP takes the COA again to the next level, right? So you're going from macro to micro. And I would say the TDP would be the most micro of the whole process. And that starts really looking at specific corridors, how we design specific routes to meet that overall vision. So Chris is going through the process right now, working with Kinetics Transportation Group. We actually did have a call with them, I want to say, Chris, am I correct, in the end of February, beginning of March, to talk about how do we retool what they're currently doing to help us to move forward and look at this new vision outside of the surtax. That being said, what we also want to be able to do is if the surtax, not if, when the surtax dollars become available after the next campaign cycle, being able to then scale up. So one, starting from what we have now, recognizing our existing budget, what can we do with that? And then two, as we scale up, what does that look like? So just wanted to provide you with the overall process and then also bring you up to speed of what we're currently doing and then how we're going to proceed starting in May at these meetings, having this conversation. Thank you.
Great. That was great. I really think it's important for this committee to start to engage in this since it hasn't been done before, and to kind of start to understand. We do have new committee members as well, but and new HART board members. But even for those of us who have been there, I think I might be the most senior member of the HART board now. No, you are. I see, Rich McLean. That's right. I was trying to think it. I don't think we've ever really adequately, I don't feel, been engaged in any way in this planning. So I'm pleased to see that will be something we'll start to do. Commissioner Overman.
Thank you. And that's sort of how we got this report on the agenda. I think the thought process is what originally was to do that strategic planning with operations, with the leadership, with the executive team as they moved the organization forward. The TDP is a piece of that. The COA is a piece of that. But this part of the board, I believe, has an opportunity to really set the vision and partnership with all of our sister agencies. So, for example, I am desperately trying to build affordable housing, and to do that, I need TOD zones, and to do that, I have to have TOD zones, and right now, our TOD pilot project is just focusing on one area. But if we had a strategic plan to have an understanding that addressed the projected growth of Hillsborough County and partnered with the comprehensive plan, members and the Metropolitan Planning Organization with their transportation projections, we would have the ability to identify those areas that we would like to designate as a TOD zone, whether or not we're putting a transit agent element in it at the moment, like we are planning for on the north-south corridor between the university and downtown. That is a project looking to implement. What I'm looking for is an intention to, where transit's going to go based on our growth patterns and our existing housing patterns. If people had transit as an option, which they currently don't have because we don't have the frequency to really allow them to make transit as a choice. In some of our areas that are still growing at a rapid rate. So when the TOD subcommittee got rolled into strategic planning, I'm like, okay, great, that's fine. That's probably where it ought to be. But when it stopped out being part of the conversation, I got a little challenged because that is so critically important to one of the reasons why I'm on this board, is to how does the agency grow into and address the growth expectations of Hillsborough County? And how does Hillsborough County address that when affordable housing is a real crisis moment? So the way that we make sure that people can actually afford to live where they live is to also make sure they have access to transit. So I'm looking at the planning process for this committee as being able to really see our vision that I think Ms. LeGrand just mentioned and was talking about at that conversation, at this level, where we have that conversation, where the COA and the TDP is the result of those conversations when the board is on page. And that gives us as board members the ability to advocate for the agency to help us not only communicate to the community where HART's going, but then also what it needs. So, which is actually, the meeting at 11. But, that's where I was going with this report. It wasn't necessarily to get an update on something that doesn't change but once a year. Is really to have the conversation about how do we formulate that once a year update? How do we see how that's going to impact our COA? And then how does that help the agency communicate to the public how we can best serve the public as the county grows, and give us opportunities to partner with, with the cities and the county on how we move forward when it comes to delivering transit. That's what that was what that request was for, and I misspoke when I suggested an update on the TDP plan. So,
Okay.
I wanted to bring that to the board's attention. That's because TOD is something that's critically important to me personally in my role, and that was why I wanted to make sure that we were addressing it on a quarterly basis so that we can see if we're making movements in that direction, not necessarily just an update on what we, on those particular reports. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Director McLean? You're muted. Director McLean, you're muted. We can't hear you, Director McLean.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, perfect. I'm calling in via the phone, and I didn't know I was controlled by my computer, so thank you. I just want to say thanks to Commissioner Overman for that clarification there, because two of the issues that I was going to bring up also is growth in Hillsborough County and how do we support that growth. But to me, also, more importantly, and this strikes to what you were also commenting about, is how do we communicate that we are planning for that future growth if and when it happens, and then how do we fund that to support that. So I think your points in asking for those questions were spot on. I think we probably should have been doing that about a year and a half ago. As you know, Hillsborough has seen tremendous growth. And I do believe people, particularly the younger generations, are making decisions on where they're going to live based on available transit. And so thank you for doing that. I do also support if we could get some kind of updates as we go along, whether that's a quarterly update or how be it. But I just want to say thanks. There are two issues right there that are spot on: growth and how do we communicate how we're supporting that through a transit. Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. And seeing no further hands raised, I guess we will, any old business, new business, and we'll adjourn. Thank you all. I think we have a 10 o'clock meeting on the same channel for any of those that are on that committee as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Kemp. That is correct.